be our last talk. After this, we'll be making some short announcements, so stay back for that. We will have our party begin like after half an hour after our final talk.
So I have stickers I'm going to leave on the edge of the stage, which you could come up and get them now, but probably we should wait at this point. Hi, everybody. So before we begin, is everybody familiar with the idea of call and response? It's a musical term, I think. Generally, I'm aware of it from hip-hop, popular culture, etc. So you might see applause signs, and what do you do when you see an applause sign? Thank you. All right. Awesome. Okay. So you might also see these sorts of calls and responses when folks put up GIFs, right? What do they expect from you? Some sort of Docker deployment joke, containers. I also want to say thank you to Mike North, who I believe is napping at present, but for loaning me his remote. So who's the audience for this talk? I would say developers at almost any stage, which I imagine is most of you in here. Is anybody here not a developer? Awesome. If you stay in the industry long enough, you're going to wind up working with a team of people. You're going to wind up maybe trying to, maybe being asked to build a team. Maybe by leading that team, maybe by participating in an existing team. So the goal for this talk is to give you specific and actionable takeaways for how to help build teams and help you get started. Most of this is my experience, and a lot of it is common sense. I had a great talk with Ernie Miller during lunch about common sense. These are things that we often don't talk about, and because we don't talk about them, you know, they go further and deeper into our minds. So common sense says, in order to build a team, you need what? What's the core component for building a team? I think I heard people, right? All right, people. It's all common sense. So action item number 1, start 10 years ago. Not particularly actionable, I suppose. If you could go back 10 years and start building teams then, start laying this groundwork, that would be awesome. Also, if you can go back 10 years, let me know. I've got some bets I'd like you to place for me. So it's not good advice. So start today. As I said, you may, if you're around long enough, you're going to be asked to recruit, you're going to be asked to interview people, you're going to be asked to help shape the teams that you're on, if not lead them. So if you can, right now, look around your table, or if you've got neighboring people, find somebody you don't know and introduce yourself quickly. If you know everybody at your table, turn around and look at the table next to you. We're not gonna move forward until everybody does this. So. Everybody meet somebody new. Awesome. So this is the point of in my opinion, this is the point of conferences. If you're going to an event, you should get around and meet people. Everybody's here to do the same thing, to get better, to meet more people, and if everybody here has that common goal, we should all be talking to one another. So for those of you who actually met new people, if you could get their contact information, their job history, and bring it up to me, let me know, because we're hiring. So we're going to move quickly through some of my history. I think it helps to know why I think that a lot of this is important. I started at the Department of, started at local government in Madison, Wisconsin. I worked here for 6 months. I grew a team of one person to, well, one more person, and I did that as I was leaving. So I found my replacement and helped them continue to be successful by ensuring that they had the people to do the job. When I left Dane County, I worked for the Department of Financial Institutions. They brought me on for 9 weeks, they brought me on for 2 weeks, and I stayed for 7 years. Through the course of being there for 7 years, I helped them. I was a part of the growth that started at 4 people when I started, and when I left was about 35. So sizable growth over a period of time. And then eventually it all came crashing down, and there was a mass exodus. So then I went to work at HashRocket. Started here. I was roughly the 4th person here as well. So over the course of the 4 years that I was there, we grew from the 4th person that I was to about 30. Then there was a mass exodus that occurred, including me. So then I went to VendiWorks, which is based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And over the course of 2.5 years, I joined there as about the 4th person. We grew to about 17 or 18 people. And then we had this similar fallout. Some of the core people left, and I went out at the same time. It's important to note that I was a partner here, and even though I left, and I wasn't particularly happy when I left, I made sure that I kept things on amicable terms so that you never know. Went to work for a company called Thunderbolt Labs. In the course of 7 months, we grew from about 4 people to 17 people before things splintered and they contracted back down to just a few people. Which gets us to Adorable. When I left Thunderbolt Labs, I started Adorable. It was me and my partner. That was about 2.5 years ago. Today, we're 24 people, and this was the last group picture that I had of the entire team, and I had to add, as you can see, about 8 people that we've hired this year. But the important thing that I want to note here is I'm not taking credit for the growth of all these teams. I was a part of all of it, right? And so there are people on my team. Kevin, who's in the lower bit there, has been critical in helping us find talent and add them to our team, as well as everybody else. Everybody is a funnel for bringing people into the company. So 15 years ago, I was a developer. I was self-taught. I didn't have a ton of experience. And probably there are some of you in the room today that could describe you now or recently. So there's no reason that you couldn't use some of these tools, techniques, etc., and wind up in a position where you're leading a team or helping to grow teams. Probably the only thing that I had then that maybe was a little unique was this, which this is a personal mission statement, which it feels like egotistical to say that I have a personal mission statement, but I retroactively made this for a talk at Ruby on Rails, and ever since I put into words the thing that I feel like I do, I just keep saying it. And so genuinely desire success in those around you and do what you can to make it happen. It's a pretty simple, common sense thing, I think. I'm not going to go through what all of this means, but there's only so much that you can do in order to make other people successful. You also don't get to choose what success looks like for other people. And finding those around you doesn't mean just your mates, just your friends. It means everybody around you, from baristas to coworkers, project managers, what have you. And then do what you can. There's a really interesting concept called spoon theory, which is you start every day with a certain amount of spoons, and you spend them as currency throughout the day. In the link here, it's associated with somebody with an illness. They have less spoons when they start out each day. So they have to choose what they're able to do and what they spend their spoons on. It's a really interesting concept, and there's only so much that you can do. Sometimes I don't have enough energy to make that next introduction or have a long sit-down meeting with somebody who I think could really use it. So I had this worldview of genuinely desiring success in those around me and do what I can to make it happen. So if somebody is sitting there pulling out their hair with a problem that they can't solve, going over and talking to them, even if you can't solve it yourself, if you don't have the answer to their question, talking through the problem with them can be extremely helpful. So let's get back to some action items. You want to avoid meeting new people, if at all possible. The watermark here isn't great, but there's a big don't behind that. So go to conferences and meetups. You're halfway there, right? You're attending conferences. It's really important to actually take that next step of starting conversations with people that you don't know, introducing yourself to them, and learning more about them. So why am I here? I got to know Vipul and Prathamesh because they came and spoke at my conference. And before I got here, other people that I knew, because they are outgoing and well-connected, are Satish and Gautam. People I've gotten to know since arriving to the conference here. I just want to point out Bilal, who had a lightning talk earlier. He talked with Ernie and I at lunch at length, and I really feel like I have a better understanding of who he is. And so now if he comes to me with a problem in the future, I know him, and I know that he's an outgoing, active person. It's not important that he's outgoing. It's important that I know him, right? So a friend shared this with me. It's not what you know. We talked about this at the start. You might not be able to solve somebody's problem for them. It's not who you know, although that's helpful and you should have a network. But it's who knows you. When you go to ask somebody for help, for example, if I go and talk to Pat, I know Pat because he's actually the first person that ever accepted a pull request from me. It was a very poorly formed pull request, and he worked through it with me. I appreciate him for that. But because I know who Pat is, and more importantly, he knows who I am, if I have a question, I go and talk to him, chances are much more likely that he's going to be able to help me out or redirect me and help me solve my problem some other way. And it's important that you know, if you're the sort of person that doesn't try and just always asks for help all the time, people are going to get to know that as well. And so if you ask somebody over and over for help, they're going to be less inclined to help you. But if you're diligent and respectful when you ask questions, much more likely to get help. So the same is true for people. Who here has ever asked a question on a mailing list or Stack Overflow, right? All sorts of hands go up. Chances are those people know you, or at least they think they do. You're some noob asking a question on the internet. And if you are rude to them, if you act poorly, say, that's not helpful at all, the answer that you gave. They're trying to reach out, they're trying to help. But if you build up a response of genuine thankfulness that somebody is trying to help, then the next time you ask a question, people are going to recognize that. They're going to see some of your previous responses, et cetera, and they'll be more inclined to help you. So another action item, watch those around you struggle. This is a lot of fun, but don't do it. How can you build a network of successful people who are also willing to help you? Build that network. Find the people around you. Help make them successful. A previous boss of mine was fond of saying that a rising tide lifts all ships. So if you have people who you've helped, they're much more likely to return the favor. Not that you should do it so that you can get help in the future, but That's karmic. Don't hire all your friends. This seems like a really good idea. I get along really, really well with my friends. We enjoy joking around, etc. But some of those same characteristics of your friends that are great at, say, 1 a.m. after a few drinks are probably also the same things that are going to be irritating as you're driving towards a deadline trying to get something done at work. Don't get bigger because bigger is better. The act of growing your company, growing your team, shouldn't be the goal in and of itself. You should only hire people if you have a reason to get large, if you have new skills that are required, or you simply can't get the work done in front of you done without more help. And I would argue that maybe hiring for short-term benefits, not a good idea either. This one came from Jeff Casimir from Touring School. Don't hire by resume alone. I've done this when I worked for the Department of Financial Institutions. We were asked to go through all of the resumes of all the incoming people and play buzzword bingo. If they didn't say that they knew specific technologies on their resume, we had to throw them out, despite the fact that some of them might have been great candidates. If you can be involved with your hiring, avoid hiring by resume alone. Don't ignore people and blindly trust process. Process is there as a guardrail, as a way to keep people on track. But if it's giving people no obvious benefit, they're going to feel trapped by it, they're going to feel constrained by it, and people are going to leave your company. Don't burn bridges. I mentioned with Bendyworks earlier, it would have been really easy for me to flip them some birds and walk out the door and say goodbye to them forever. Because I didn't do that, cooler heads prevailed. We came back, and last year we spent about a year working on a project with IBM together with 6 people. And that was a tremendous amount of revenue for both of our companies and made us much more successful. People are weird and squishy. We make mistakes. We miscommunicate all the time. If you give people the benefit of the doubt, more times than not, that's going to come back, and you'll be able to get over disagreements, etc. Don't take out the trash. So this was one thing when I worked at HashRocket that always struck me every time I saw it. Marion, our CFO at the time, now the CEO of HashRocket, took out the trash. And it seems like such a small thing, but if the CFO of the company has time to pick up the trash, take it down to the trash chute, and replace the bag, there's no reason any of our developers couldn't do that. Most of them still didn't, including myself occasionally. But lead by example. If you want to live and work in a place that is tidy, clean up after yourself. Put somebody else's dish in the dishwasher and let other people know what the expectations are. Don't only look at the work in front of you. So, are you working to solve the right problem? A lot of times, if we have deadlines and other constraints, we tend to get tunnel vision, and we don't bother looking around, making sure that everybody is happy, healthy, and contributing their best self to the team. I've been there. I was there right before this conference. We had a hard deadline before my travel, and it's super easy to get hyper-focused on the work that is in front of you. By taking a step back, I was able to pull in a few other people and distribute some of that work, and we were able to get it all done before I left. Don't never fire anyone. This might seem counterintuitive because it seems like firing people is a bad thing, especially with the genuinely desirous success in those around you. If somebody is not a good fit for your team, that's going to show up in weird ways. Oftentimes it can become cancerous and cause lack of productivity, wasted time from the rest of your team having to deal with somebody who's not happy. I've fired a number of people over the years. It's not pleasant, but I've had experiences where I've fired somebody, they turned around and got a job for double what we were paying them. And so in the end, much more successful for them. As well, they just weren't happy where we were. On the flip side, don't let anyone leave. Hold on to everybody. Make sure that they don't have a chance of escaping your company. When I talk to people about joining Adorable, I always tell them, I don't expect that they're going to retire from Adorable. There are other challenges out there, some more interesting, and I expect that at some point they're going to get an offer. They should talk to all the recruiters. They should try and find a better offer. If they've got something that's going to make them happier, then they should do that. I'm more interested in people growing up and out, because if I have well-connected people higher up in other companies, that's an in for us. That's an opportunity for us. Also, if we've already started this conversation and they know that I know that they're not going to be around forever, if they get to a point where they're thinking about leaving, hopefully they come and talk to me and say, hey, I got this job offer, and they're willing to pay 10% more. And maybe I can pay more for that. And if not, I can work on getting a replacement to backfill for them and deal with the situation that's caused by their no longer being there. Don't get your team to fight amongst themselves. There's a certain amount of disagreement that's healthy in a team, but we need to keep the atmosphere civil and provide space for disagreement and resolution of disagreement. I was on a team once where the general consensus of management was, you take half the team, you take half the team, and we're going to come back and fight to the death. I did not last very long there. It's not my style of work. Don't avoid planning. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. As somebody who's afflicted with wanderlust and likes to travel, that sounds pretty good. But if you don't have, as somebody who's now responsible for people's careers, I know that we have certain measurements that we have to hit in order to be successful. Don't only hire rock stars. Does anybody here work with a rock star? Gautam? All right. So rock stars are awesome, except the appropriate analogy is probably that they're going to trash a hotel room and leave somebody else with the mess, right? What we're really looking for are people who are experienced, willing to help, and amplify the efforts of everybody around them. And those people are worth their weight in gold. I don't know if 10x is an actual multiplier, but there was a tweet recently that suggested if you want to be a 10x developer, find 10 developers and make them twice as effective. I think that was spot on. Avoid defined roles. Don't do that. Don't avoid defined roles. Make sure that people have the expectations set for their job. If somebody is responsible, if one specific person is responsible, and you know that everybody knows that that person is responsible, if that job doesn't get done, people will know why, or people will know that it didn't get done, probably know why it didn't get done, because so-and-so is off on vacation this week. Expectations are set by roles. And anger and frustration is a violation of expectation. This can also lead into legal ramifications. If you wind up firing somebody and you say, the reason that we're firing you is you didn't write any tests for your code, or you didn't take out the trash, or you didn't do this other chore that everybody at the office is supposed to do. by not defining that and saying that this is explicitly an expectation that we hold of you, you can get into legal trouble. They can contest their firing. Only hire people who already get your jokes. This actually hit me pretty hard when we started hiring junior developers, because our first 5 or so people were all senior people who'd lived on the internet for a long time, and so we got everybody's references, and it was fine, it was fun, but we didn't get exposed to new jokes that much, and on the flip side, we didn't ever have that opportunity to say, whoa, you haven't heard about hamster dance, right? Everybody know what hamster dance is? Anybody know what hamster dance is? I see the 2 old guys over there raise their hand. This, exactly, right? So you get to share new experiences. After the conference, search hamster dance, and I'm sorry. Also, TV shows, music, etc. Some of our junior people have introduced me to TV shows and music that I wouldn't have listened to otherwise, which seems like a weird plus for hiring somebody, but totally is. So there's 17 action items that you can take away. You should do all this stuff now. If you're not in a position to actually make decisions about who gets hired, you're probably in a position to influence who gets hired, etc. So a funny thing happened on the way to Duck and Ruby, and for me, it put a little exclamation point on why you should do all this stuff. Why is any of this stuff important? I got an email from a friend saying, hey, my company's imploding, and as you know, because we had already talked, I'm already moving on, but I have this person over here who just moved to your city who is going to be looking for a job real quick now. And so in the introduction email between me and this, the person that sent the email and the third party, he described me, or he said, beyond being one of the best people I know, he, meaning me, is an insanely connected person. He's currently traveling to India, so responses may be slow. So this happened in between, while I was in Chicago on a layover. And so there's another company in my town who is, I've literally gotten recruiting emails from about 15 different companies for another company who's actually a client as well. So I know what's going on there. And they can't hire anybody in Madison. And despite having invested in all of these recruiters, they still don't know about this person. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to hire this person. And if I can't, what I'm going to say is, here are some other folks that you should talk to. In fact, my response, which you probably can't see, says, here's a site that gives an overview of all the local tech companies. Here are the ones that I recommend you talk to. Talk to us first, of course. And then I'm happy to answer specific questions when I'm more available after this talk. And so I have an inside line to hiring one of the more talented developers in our community, because I've done all these things. I've talked to people. I've met people at conferences, and people know that about me. And I genuinely desire success in those around me, so people send other people my way. I don't always have the spoons to deal with all of them when they come, but I just say that. It's like, I don't know if I can help you. Maybe talk to this person and redirect them. So I'm out of time. I'm going to keep going because I've only got 9 slides left. I read this book at 4 separate companies, and the important part is the subtitle. I don't know how well it comes up on the screens, but A Guide to Giving and Getting Advice Successfully. And as we wrapped up this book club at Adorable recently, reading the last chapter, a lot of it stuck with me and felt appropriate to this talk. So never use cheap seed. These are all gardening technologies that a farmer friend of his has taught him over the years about gardening. And he calls the gardening friend a consultant, really just giving advice. So if you need somebody to build a Rails application, you can hire somebody who knows HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you can probably get there. It's going to take much more time and effort, and it may not work, but if you start with somebody who already knows Python or another object-oriented language, they're going to be much more successful, even if they don't know Ruby. So keep in mind where you start with each individual member of the team that you're considering adding. A prepared soil is the secret of all gardening. The environment that you place your team in determines a lot of the success of it, whether it's internal politics, deadlines, or ongoing education and community involvement. All of those things help to make your team what it is, for better or for worse. Timing is critical. If you bring somebody on the team before they're ready, chances are they're not going to be successful. If you bring them on the team before you're ready, again, they're not going to be successful. We had this situation where one of our most recent hires, we sort of left them, we explained explicitly what we were waiting for and said, either it's going to work or it's not. I don't want to guarantee that we're going to hire you. We have this window that we're waiting for a response in. Communicating that, we eventually were able to get her hired, which was awesome. Again, growth for its own sake is a bad thing in general, and so making sure that you're hiring at the right time, super important. The plants that hold the firmest are the ones that develop their own roots. We talked about passion earlier. I'm not sure if that's the right way to gauge, or I don't think that's the right analogy for this, but I think somebody who deliberately practices, whether it's at work or outside of work, has the luxury of being able to do it outside of work. If they're genuinely interested in solving the problems that their job offers, that is somebody who's going to be much more effective and more loyal and more willing to help those around them than anybody else. Excessive watering produces weakness, not strength. So in this case, the gardener was watering his crops and watered them off a lot. And because the plants didn't need to reach down far for water, their roots didn't grow very far. I think the analogy to IT industry and Silicon Valley, et cetera, if you can go to a job and get your hair cut and get your groceries delivered and have a masseuse come to the office, if you ever leave that position or the industry, how are you going to get your hair cut? I mean, there are genuinely problems that most people have to solve in their lives that these people no longer have to do. And I think that ultimately will create a weaker set of folks. And in spite of your best efforts, some plants will die. People won't choose to work with you. The person that sent me that email with the opportunity to hire somebody, we had interviewed him as well. He wound up not choosing to work with us. And while I could have said, fine, I don't want to work with you ever again either, by being open to that, respecting their choice, letting them choose where they're going to be more successful, we now have this opportunity today. I want to say it one more time. Genuinely desire success in those around you and do what you can to make it happen. Then on the plane ride over, in addition to the other 6 movies I watched, I also watched Zootopia, and the line at the end got me. No matter what type of animal you are, change starts with you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? I think a lot of questions will be there, right? we all want to know how to build teams. Okay, yeah.
Uh, Hello,
Hi.
my name is Samir. I work on a lot of open source libraries for Ruby, and I wanted to know if the principles that you talked about for building teams, how can they be applied to teams that work on open source software where a lot of development is mainly done by volunteers?
So let me try and rephrase your question. I didn't catch all of it. Does this also apply to open source software?
Only to open source software.
Does it only apply to open source software?
Yeah.
No, quite the contrary. So I run a consulting firm, and these are all rules that I use that have gotten us to where we are today. So absolutely not only open source software. Do they apply to open source software? Absolutely. I think a lot of times we lose track of the fact that software is written by people. And so it's the same people that are doing paid work doing non-paid work.
No, but in the case of open source, there's a lot of, one big problem is that you don't really have a choice when it comes to hiring someone or firing someone because it's mostly driven by volunteers.
Sure. That's not to say that you can't choose not to work with somebody on a project, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so allowing them to be successful by communicating that and making the project interesting and accessible to newer people, just clearly setting expectations is going to allow you to interact with those people. It might be that you just can't work with somebody. There are people out there that, for one reason or the other, you can't work with. Doesn't stop them from submitting code, but you need to communicate, why you're attempting to work with them, why, how, and when you're committed to working with them or not committed to working with them, right? Mm-hmm. So put yourself in their shoes. How would you want to be communicated? It doesn't stop people from blowing up, but at the same time, if you're being reasonable, then everybody else is going to read the same conversation and probably understand what's going on, right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
We can still take one question.
Hi, I'm Hemant. Very interesting stuff you talked about. Enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
So at what point of time, like you're working in a team, you generally want everyone to be successful, you want to achieve your target, right?
Yep.
At what point of time do you decide, if you're the boss, I want to fire this guy?
Again, it's not a decision that I come to lightly when I choose to fire somebody, right? It's a hard thing to do. It's unpleasant. But are they being successful? Are they happy working on the project that they're working on? If not, is there something else that you can have them work on? Or can you transfer their responsibilities to somebody else and have them work on something that's more successful? If it winds up that they're just a poor fit, they're not happy working on the project, you don't have anywhere else to go with them, having that conversation is hard, but I think it makes everybody around them happier, more successful as well. Because if somebody is unhappy, like I said, it can turn into a cancerous situation where they're unhappy and they're grumpy all day at work, and then they come and sit next to somebody else, and now you've got two grumpy people. When it's starting to affect more people than just them, definitely take action. Doesn't necessarily have to be fire them, but I think you have to be willing to fire people in order to be successful.
And Jim, one question from me. You've spoken about all the things that can happen inside an organization, about how you should behave, how should the management behave, how should the people behave, consulting stuff. just extending this a little more, what are your thoughts, if any, about organizations, companies coming together, trying to change the ecosystem or build the ecosystem in which they are? Like, for example, there are like over 65 companies being represented at this conference. What are your ideas, if any, about what can these companies do to make life better for all?
That's a great question. So as I understand, the question is, what can organizations or companies do to
improve the ecosystem or to build a better place where people want to either move between the companies or do something together?
Sure. And honestly, I think the answer is a lot of these same things. So by recognizing that, for example, your company, Josh Software, and my company, Adorable, are competitors. Therefore, we're enemies, right? It's not the case, because there's enough work, and we've each built successful companies. We can work together, right? And what I want is for Josh Software to be successful. And so what can Adorable do that can make it more successful, right? And so same goes for all 65 organizations that are represented here. I want you to be successful. I'm going to do what I can to make it happen. If you come to me and say, Josh is going to be successful if you give me $1 million, I simply can't do that. But I might be, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. But there might be things that we can do to help your situation. And at the same time, as we're talking, we're going to learn more about one another, and there might be opportunity for us to collaborate or for you to help us as well.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Can we have a big round of applause?